Bryant.
And I'm Margaret Campbell.
And we're coming to you today for Pulaski TV at the Trail of Tears Interpretive Center in downtown Pulaski. The Trail of Tears was the forced removal of the Native American tribes west of the Mississippi. Pulaski is geographically significant in that two of those trails actually intersected in Pulaski. It's the only place where any of the southern routes actually intersected. We have a lot of history. What better place for us to honor and remember those that lost their lives. A total of 15,000 Indian nationals would have been forced along the march. Of that 15,000, 4,000 perished. Of the 15,000, actually 3,000 passed through Pulaski, and of those 3,000, about 28% or 800 perished along the route.
It was a very sad period in American history.
Absolutely, it was a very sad period, but it was also a time of expansive growth, and that's where we kind of started coming at odds with the indigenous people. This actually started with President Jackson in 1830. The Indian Removal Act was signed. But remember, going back to 1803, President Thomas Jefferson was the first president to advocate and vocalize that we needed to remove the Native American tribes west of the Mississippi. It's very unfortunate, and it was by no means a slam dunk. When the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830, the Congress, 107 voted yes, 97 voted no. Senate, it was 28 yes, 19 no. Of those 97 congressional no's, David Crockett
was one of them.
That's right, and he voted no, and it lost him the re-election in his next campaign bid. So the Indian Removal Act, while it was passed in 1830, was very contentious. A lot of people didn't agree with it, including Native American members. Native Americans were actually divided into three groups. You had pro-treaty, anti-treaty, and the settlers. The settlers were kind of like the old school folks. They voluntarily left because they didn't want to have anything to do with the white man. They wanted to be away and to leave. They were willing to leave their ancestral homes in order to not be around the white men. The 1830 Indian Removal Act started it and put it in place. However, Native Americans actually fought within the legal system, including Chief John Ross. John Ross was a full-blooded Cherokee, but he was schooled in English schools. He was fluent in English, and he realized early on that it was probably a losing battle, but the only way to win it was to take it to the courts. It was taken to the courts, and in fact, Worcester versus Georgia, the Supreme Court overruled it. However, President Jackson just completely ignored it. He didn't care. He absolutely did not care. But with the help of John Ross, they would eventually come up with the Treaty of New Dakota in 1836, which allowed for a higher monetary compensation and other provisions that were allowed. When they first started in 1826, when they first started negotiating the Indian Removal Act, they were only going to offer the Native Americans, all of the Native Americans, $200,000. And they had for all the territory west of the Mississippi. By the time that Chief John Ross and others got involved in the negotiation, taking it to court, having to go to the Supreme Court, the final figure was $5 million for all territory west of the Mississippi. As we know, all territory would later become a term that the Congress would decide what that actually meant. But it was very interesting that it did take a Native American and his involvement in the U.S. legal system in order to get as much as he could for the Native American tribes. So the Treaty of New Dakota, after it was signed and ratified, that was the clincher. It was the final act needed to begin the actual removal of the Native American tribes. As I said earlier, 15,000 people would travel on the routes going west. Bell and Benj routes were the two routes intersected in Pulaski, and they were the total of number 3,000 Native Americans that either walked or rode. Remember, of those 3,000, 800 of them perished. Pulaski was also geographically significant, not only because it intersected, but because one of the routes were actually very, very well documented. The Bell route was actually Lieutenant John Adair Bell. And because you had a lot of military people that were on the route, you actually had a lot of documentation. You see where they had vouchers signed for provisions, etc. A lot of letters back and forth talking about the condition of the Native Americans along that route as well. So Benj and Bell are named for the two gentlemen that supervised them. You had Wagon Master John Benj, and then you had John Adair Bell. These two routes started in 1838, and they would end in 1839 in Oklahoma. One of them started from Fort Payne, and the other started from Fort Cass. It's heartbreaking when you think of almost a year in time that it took these individuals to travel, and just the hardships they must have endured are truly unimaginable.